Okay, so our second speaker of the evening is Pierre from Paymium.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for inviting me tonight. And again, good evening. I'm going to present Paymium, the startup I co-founded actually in 2011. But before that, I spent a few minutes on Bitcoin because some things might be confusing, especially if you hear about altcoins tonight, which is probably not the best way to be introduced to the technology. First, let's understand the technology. Okay, what's Bitcoin at the core? Bitcoin is a new internet protocol that many people think of as a missing piece in a big puzzle of internet protocols. You knew about the HTTP, SMTP, even DNS. All these protocols contribute to what is today the web. Most people that are working in the web industry today don't know exactly how HTTP or SMTP or DNS work. I guess only if you are a developer, like me, I'm a part-time developer. I have some experience with HTTP, but I could get in hot waters if I was meant to explain to you how TCP IP works, for instance. So I will not explain to you how Bitcoin works. And I can refer you to a book I wrote that's called Bitcoin Mode d'Emploi, or Bitcoin Book, another book that I wrote about it. And you'll know more about how it works. Tonight, it's not about how it works. It's about what it is and what we can do with it. Because I only have 10 minutes, which is not enough for going deeper into the inner workings of the protocol. So it's a transaction protocol, meaning we can do a certain number of things. Bitcoin does a few things, but it does it well. It doesn't do everything. And the point is, it's very difficult to write secure code and to build a very secure network. So people that are trying to sell the idea that it's easy just to fork the code and launch a new network, I think are confusing the market and perhaps confusing themselves. So what's at the heart of Bitcoin is an invention, the invention of a collective signature. That's new compared to the existing concept of electronic signature, which is an individual signature. The invention of the electronic signature, by the way, is from 1980, so it's not new by any means. What's new since 2008 is the collective signature that we have with Bitcoin. So it's free software. Everybody can fork it, like the people that spoke before me and the one presentation after me. It's easy to fork it. So you can clone the protocol, clone the software. What you cannot do is clone the network because obviously there is an infrastructure behind it. Just like you can't clone the web, even though you can launch your own navigator, your own browser, you can't clone the web network. It's electronic cash. So before Bitcoin, there was no cash on the internet. You had to pay with payment means that were based on the card, on the bank card. With Bitcoin, it's a new concept where we do push payments instead of pull payments. In other words, we are not drawing from an account, we are pushing a payment transaction over the network. And that's what makes it a very new payment means. And that's exactly how Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor, dubbed the system, an electronic cash system. It's a community bank. Sometimes people say there is no intermediary in Bitcoin. That's wrong. The intermediary is the network. The intermediation, it's a software-mediated approach to the banking systems. So in a way, I call it a community bank because everybody that's connected to the network is becoming part of the bank. It's almost an employee of the bank being rewarded with some of the money creation of the Bitcoins. And if you are simply a user, you're a user, but you're part of the community bank ecosystem. And the nice thing about it is because it's free software, there is no enrollment in the system. So we have a new approach to identity that I won't have time to expand on tonight. But so Bitcoin is hard to grasp. Most people have a hard time wrapping their heads around this concept because there are lots of, at least 3 things that it can be identified with. A shared ledger, all the transactions go in a single ledger that's shared between all the people on the network. It's a peer-to-peer network, so the transactions are spread over the network by peers, and there is no central server that you knew already. And it's an asset, so I can transfer the value from A to B with Bitcoin. So that's why it's an internet of transactions. So what do we do with it at Paymium? At Paymium, we are primarily an exchange platform. So we are allowing people to trade Bitcoins for euro and euro for Bitcoins. And that's an essential piece of the puzzle in the ecosystem, because if you want to sell and buy and sell some things with Bitcoins, you need to put a price tag on it. And if you wait until the rate of Bitcoin is flat and we have we can express prices in Bitcoin, then we'd have to wait for a very long time. So it's important to be able to trade Bitcoins back and forth between different currencies. For two very important things. First of all, merchants want to pay their suppliers sometimes in euros or dollars, and they also have to pay taxes in euros, because the government only accepts euros for payments of taxes, for now. So e-commerce and point-of-sale application for accepting Bitcoins are two services we offer today on top of this exchange platform. So if you are a regular user, an individual user, you probably want to sign up at Paymium just to get your first Bitcoins. You send some euros to the platform and you get the possibility to buy Bitcoins on your payment account. But if you are a merchant, likewise, you can sign up at Paymium and you'll have a way to accept Bitcoins on your website. So we offer the possibility to put market orders on the platform. That means you don't have to put a limit order. You just set your amount and we'll grab the going rate at the time of the transaction and we'll apply this rate to the exchange. That's why we can offer this instant conversion to merchants, because that's the demand of the merchants. Zero fraud means as a merchant you are paid in cash, electronic cash. There is no chargeback. There is no possibility for the customer to reverse the transaction by himself. So you have very limited risk of fraud, even zero fraud, potentially accepting Bitcoins. And also there is zero fee per transaction because the cost is very small and it's borne by the payer, not by the merchant. Just like cash, when you pay in cash, in fact, as a shopper, you spend time getting the cash, and this cost is borne by the shopper, not by the merchant. If you are a small company or a blogger, you can put a payment button and have even micropayments. On my blog, for instance, I put my book for sale for 15 euros. So if you click on it today, I don't know what the rate will be, but 15 euros is a price tag. So I will get 15 euros at the end of the transaction. And this invoice will tell your wallet, actually, in this QR code, how much Bitcoins you need to send to pay me 15 euros. So that's a simple payment button. You click on the button, and you get the invoice. Actually, this screen can be skipped if it's a digital download. So at the point of sale, we've partnered with Ingenico, which is the world leader for payment terminals, to propose Bitcoin accepting solutions at the point of sale. So that's going to be rolled out in the fall of 2015 with their new generation of terminals. I think it's a very important factor in the adoption of Bitcoin. Just to see people paying in Bitcoin at the point of sale is going to be adding a lot of ease of use and credibility to the Bitcoin wallets. It's really a one-click process. You flash with your wallet, your mobile phone, you flash the code, and that's paid. Can be simpler than that. And at the end of the transaction, the merchant is getting exactly 19.9 euros here, and zero fees. So you hear lots of silly things, you can hear and read lots of silly things about Bitcoin. And one of the things you can hear is completely anonymous. Well, it turns out it's exactly the opposite. It's relatively anonymous. In other words, you can control your private data to some extent, especially with a merchant. Certainly not against the authorities or the NSA, because it's very difficult to stay anonymous on the internet. It takes a lot of technical skills that most people don't have. And the transactions are in the blockchain forever. So it's always possible to do forensics long after the facts. And this is showing a transaction graph here. For instance, if this address, Bitcoin address here, has been linked to a social network, or this one has been attached to a delivery address at the e-commerce website, then we have a data trail to identify the parties. So don't think of it as something anonymous. It's not. The only anonymous payment means is banknotes. And all the criminals know that. Okay, so regulation will be needed because it's a common good. And like most common goods, like fish in the ocean or many other things, without regulation, we have a phenomenon called the tragedy of the commons. People grab it and do silly things with it, or they will catch all the fish and there will be no fish left. So it's a bit with Bitcoin, we can see that with lots of altcoins. I know there are only 2 tonight, but there are hundreds of them. And I think it's a case of a tragedy of the commons, people trying to grab something without much perspective on the common good. So that's it. Thank you.
Please, Pierre, I would like to know when you are paying with the QR code, are the transaction fee included into the payment, or will the merchant have 0.002 Bitcoin less than expected?
Yes, actually the fees is the network fee. That's it. What happens is when you convert, when the merchant converts to euros, there is actually a buyer of the Bitcoins on the platform that's transforming the Bitcoins in euros. And that's when we earn, say, 0.5% on the transaction. But it's not the merchant that's paying, it's the person buying the merchant's Bitcoins. Right. So it's it's very simple, but it's...
So no surprise for the buyer of the product and no surprise for the merchant neither?
Well, the buyer is paying in cash, so he has to trust the merchant. When you pay in cash, you trust the merchant, and there are people talking about reputation system for merchants that could expand the scope of the merchants that are trustworthy for the consumer. But yes, it's a cash payment.
No, I was just thinking about, I was supposed to pay 20 and I paid 20,002. There's no this problem because the trader are actually paying it, not the merchant and not the buyer.
Exactly.
So it's good for the confidence of both parties.
Mm. If I understand well, in fact, the merchant is not accepting Bitcoin payments at all. It's accepting that people who pay in Bitcoins to you can operate the system.
Exactly. He's accepting a payment through the Bitcoin network,
exactly.
not the currency. I think the notion of currency is overplayed in the press and in most presentations. Bitcoin is primarily a network that you can use to transfer value and therefore use it as a payment network. It's not a currency yet. It will be perhaps in 20 years from now, but for now it's a very useful payment network. And for a merchant, it's like having a Visa, MasterCard, Bitcoin. Except Bitcoin is open source and Visa, MasterCard are private systems.
Yeah, but Visa and MasterCard transactions are also reversible.
Yeah, so it's not cash.
And
that's also different from Visa, MasterCard, because people sometimes want to pay in cash, not with card.
So you will, all transactions that go through the Paymium network will be irreversible.
Yeah, the Bitcoin transaction can be refunded, but cannot be reversed. In other words, the merchant is in driving seat for the refund.
But do you have a process for that?
Yeah. Obviously, merchants will put in place their refund, just like they refund cash in store. If you go in store, they have a process for cash refunds. It's the same. Again, if the shopper will use Bitcoin because they don't want to expose their card data on the internet. So they don't want to take the risk to expose their bank data on the internet. That's one good reason to use Bitcoin. Just like you use cash in some shops, because you don't want to give your card everywhere, for instance, for a small payment. You don't want to pay something like that's 50 cents or one euro on the internet with a bank card. It doesn't make sense. With Bitcoin, it's one flash, boom, I pay, and it's €1. So its micro-payment capability is very, very interesting for merchants and shoppers.
Okay, thank you.
You've been speaking a lot about payment system, and I hear there are two other alternative currency. What do you think about alternative currencies?
I think there are, as you said, there are experiments, but they are not networks yet. People claim they will, you know, the thing is Bitcoin isn't broken and doesn't need fixing. So they will have a hard time, I think, going against the network effect. Just like the web did not take off with many companies building their own browser. I think there will be a need for interoperability and simplicity. I think altcoins at this point bring only market confusion and technical confusion, and therefore they are not good for the development of Bitcoin. But that's fine, because Bitcoin is very resilient, and we'll see what comes out of this.
Thank you.
You were talking about regulation. Okay, I'm Chris. You were talking about regulation. What is your status in France towards the regulation? Do you have an electronic money license? How do you work?
It's very simple. We are an agent of a payment institution, so it's very simple. We are abiding to the rule of the European Directive on Payments, DSP, and that's the situation. Unlike many of our competitors who have no relationship with a licensed institution. So we are working with a payment institution. We are not handling any flows in euros. All the euros are flowing through payment institutions. We are only handling Bitcoin flows.
Thank you.
You talked about, the dangers of the common good.
Tragedy of the commons. That's an old article written by an economist.
But that tragedy has already happened, because the Bitcoins are already concentrated in the hands of a few. It's already controlled by a few. I mean, it was mentioned earlier, but the miners are a few, the wallets are also a few. It's an oligopoly. It's not a distributed, decentralized system.
I don't know that, because, for instance, I give you an example. You have 10,000 Bitcoins on one address. How many owners of that address are there? You don't know. It could be an exchange, and you have thousands of accounts on that address. So the notion that because there are a few addresses with tons of Bitcoins on them doesn't make any sense to qualify the number of people that own the Bitcoins.
But
it's totally irrelevant.
But people have declared how much they've invested, for example, in mining systems. They invested in funds. They invested hundreds of millions of dollars. Right. That we know. So we...
Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. There is an infrastructure to be built, and that's fine that people invest in mining infrastructure. That doesn't mean they own all the Bitcoins. Not at all. It can be, for instance, if they invest in hardware, maybe they have crowdfunded. Maybe it's a cloud mining system.
Maybe
you know, you don't know. We don't know. So there is no serious.
Some people must know.
Not necessarily. I think there are many. Bitcoin is an experiment.
Written,
journalists know better than the others. I think journalists, like everybody else, they have to learn a lot about Bitcoin because it's still an experiment. So there are lots of things we are learning every day about Bitcoin. And for instance, I give you an example: the environmental aspect of energy consumption of the Bitcoin network, which is a real question, valid question. No one has produced a very serious study on the comparative impact on the environment of the traditional payment system and Bitcoin. It would be very interesting. I look forward to that. But that's not been done. So there are tons of questions about Bitcoin that need to be asked and that must be answered. But just like any other technology, if you wind back to the 90s when the web started, there was lots of questions about the web. People writing lots of silly things about the web, what the internet will be, etc. And still, those were valid questions, except we are still answering some of them today. And for Bitcoin, I think it's the same. 30 years after the beginning of the web, we are still seeing lots of new developments. And I think Bitcoin is just the same. It's part of this internet protocol puzzle that I was showing.
Pierre, thank you very much. Thank you.